Picture yourself waking up on the morning of Tuesday, February 14th, 1978, Valentine's Day, and seeing something through your bedroom window that made your stomach drop. Not the gentle snow you'd gone to sleep to the night before. Proper drifts, mountains of snow piled against garden walls, burying cars completely, blocking front doors so thoroughly that people had to climb out through upstairs windows. This wasn't just a heavy snowfall. This was the blizzard of 1978, and for 3 days straight, Britain would be buried under snow so deep, so relentless, that the army would be called out to dig the country free. The storm had been building since the weekend, but nobody quite grasped what was coming. The Met Office had forecast snow, certainly, but Britain got snow every winter. A bit of disruption, perhaps. Schools might close for a day or two, and then life would carry on. That's what most folk thought as they went about their Sunday and Monday, getting the shopping in, heading to work, children doing their homework by the coal fire. But this wasn't ordinary snow. This was something Britain hadn't seen in decades. By Monday evening, February 13th, the snow was already falling heavily across the south and east. Throughout the night, while families slept in their beds, the storm intensified. Snow fell at rates nobody had predicted, driven by winds that howled through the streets, piling the snow into drifts that grew taller by the hour. By dawn on Tuesday morning, vast swathes of Britain were already cut off from the outside world. The scale of it hit people the moment they woke. You'd pull back your curtains expecting to see your street, your garden, the familiar view you'd seen every morning for years. Instead, you'd see nothing but white. Snow halfway up ground floor windows. Cars completely buried, just odd humps in the landscape. Garden fences vanished entirely. The milk bottles left on the doorstep the night before. Gone, somewhere under 3 feet of snow. Trying to leave the house was the first challenge. Front doors wouldn't budge, blocked solid by snow that had drifted against them overnight. People had to go upstairs, open windows, and literally dig their way out from above. Grown men, still in their pajamas and wellies, shoveling snow from bedroom windows just to create a path to their own front gardens. Roads had disappeared, completely vanished under the snow. You couldn't tell where the pavement ended and the road began. Cars that had been parked on streets the night before were buried so deep that only their aerials poked through the drifts. One family in Lincolnshire woke to find their car had been buried under a drift so massive they didn't find it again until March. The trains stopped running almost immediately. British Rail simply couldn't cope. Points froze solid, signals disappeared under snow, and entire sections of track became impassable. Thousands of commuters who tried to get to work on Tuesday morning found themselves stranded at stations, watching trains that would never come. Some gave up and trudged home through waist-deep snow. Others, stuck in London or other cities far from home, had to find emergency accommodation, sleeping in station waiting rooms or imposing on kind strangers. If you lived through it, you'll remember that eerie silence that descended on Tuesday. No cars moving, no buses running, no trains, just the wind, howling relentlessly, and the endless fall of snow. Britain, usually bustling and busy even in winter, had ground to a complete halt. By Tuesday afternoon, the situation was becoming desperate in rural areas. Villages across the south and east found themselves completely cut off. Roads in, roads out, all impassable. Drifts 8, 10, even 15 feet high blocked country lanes. Farmers couldn't reach their livestock. Elderly people living alone couldn't get to shops. The postman couldn't deliver. The doctor couldn't visit. These communities were isolated as thoroughly as if they'd been on desert islands. In Somerset, entire villages were buried. Ilminster, Chard, Crewkerne, places that usually handled winter weather without fuss, found themselves under snow deeper than anyone could remember. One farmer near Taunton spent 2 days digging out his sheep, only to find he'd lost nearly half his flock, suffocated in the drifts or frozen where they stood. The army was called in by Wednesday morning. Soldiers from bases across the south were mobilised with snowplows, diggers, anything that could shift snow. They worked around the clock, prioritising hospitals, emergency services, and the most isolated communities. You'd see convoys of army trucks, green and incongruous against the endless white carving paths through drifts taller than the vehicles themselves. Please subscribe to the channel to keep these stories alive, but the army, for all their efforts, could only do so much. The snow kept falling. Wednesday brought more, and Thursday brought yet more again. Every road they cleared would drift over within hours. Every path they cut would fill in overnight. It was exhausting, relentless work, and the soldiers, brilliant as they were, couldn't be everywhere at once. Stories of survival and community spirit emerged from the chaos. In one village in Kent, cut off for 4 days straight, residents organised themselves into teams. Young men dug paths between houses. Women pooled their food supplies, cooking communal meals in whichever house still had power. The village shop, normally a quiet little place selling basics, became an emergency distribution centre, the shopkeeper handing out supplies to anyone who needed them, keeping careful notes but not worrying too much about immediate payment. A farmer in Wiltshire, realising his elderly neighbours hadn't been seen since Monday, dug a path nearly a quarter-mile long through chest-deep snow to reach their cottage. He found them alive but freezing, their coal nearly gone, surviving on tinned soup and stale bread. He dug them out, brought them back to his farmhouse, and they stayed with his family for a week until the roads cleared. The cities fared slightly better, but only just. London, used to coping with winter weather, struggled badly. The tube kept running on most lines, becoming the only reliable way to get around. Buses were abandoned in streets, their drivers simply leaving them where they stood when the snow became too deep. Office workers who'd made it into work on Tuesday found themselves unable to get home, sleeping on office floors, sharing sandwiches from the canteen, wondering when this would end. The real heroes were the ordinary people who just got on with it. Postmen who walked their routes when their vans couldn't move. Nurses who trekked miles through the snow to reach their hospitals. Shopkeepers who opened their doors even when deliveries couldn't get through, selling whatever they had left. Neighbours checking on neighbours, sharing food, coal, warmth, company. The snow finally began to ease on Friday, February 17th. 3 days of relentless blizzard conditions finally started to let up, but by then, the damage was done. Britain was buried under the heaviest snowfall in decades. Drifts in some areas measured over 20 feet high. Roads would take weeks to fully clear. Rail services limped back into operation gradually, facing delays and cancellations for days afterwards. The economic cost was enormous. Businesses lost millions in productivity. Thousands of sheep and cattle died. Crops were destroyed, but the human cost miraculously was relatively small. People looked after each other. Communities pulled together. The British instinct to muddle through, to help your neighbour, to just get on with it, saw the country through. If you remember that Valentine's Day when romance took a back seat to survival, share your story in the comments. Where were you when the snow came? How did you cope? What do you remember most clearly? Looking back now, 46 years on, the blizzard of 1978 stands as a reminder of how vulnerable we can be to nature's fury, but also how resilient communities become when tested. Modern Britain, with better forecasting, better infrastructure, better emergency planning, might handle such a storm more efficiently. But would we handle it with the same spirit? The same willingness to help strangers, to share what little we had, to dig paths and check on elderly neighbours without being asked? The snow melted eventually, as snow always does. Roads reopened, trains ran again, life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in 1970s Britain. But for 3 days in February 1978, the country was forced to slow down, stop, and remember what mattered. Not Valentine's cards or chocolates or fancy dinners, just getting through. Together. Britain buried for 3 days straight, the army on the streets, villages isolated, cars abandoned, and through it all, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because that's what you did. That's what we all did. It wasn't heroic in our minds. It was just necessary. Share your memories, subscribe to keep these stories alive, and remember when Britain ground to a halt and somehow kept going anyway, one shovelful of snow at a time.